Well, as things change, like the year, welcome to 2019, things also stay the same, like the Pittsburgh Steelers having drama and being surrounded by drama. Even as their season closes, even as the 2018 asinine dramatic season comes to an end and is officially over, that roller coaster ride is over, the Steelers can't just let it be. There's more drama surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers, namely their superstar wide receiver, Antonio Brown. This is another edition, another Radio Gold edition, kind of a Steelers end-of-season edition of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, coming at you from the Beaver County Auto Studios up above Market Square here in downtown Pittsburgh. I am your host, Mike Asti, and I am here to tell you why enough is finally enough, and the Pittsburgh Steelers need to trade Antonio Brown. Now, Antonio Brown is one of the greatest wide receivers this game has ever seen. He has the greatest of all-time ring on his finger that he wears periodically, but it actually might be true eventually. He's on that kind of pace. Antonio Brown, another stellar season this year, and that doesn't even include one game, as he obviously did not play in Week 17 and was held out of that game for what was reported as an injury, and not to say there wasn't any truth to that. At least Mike Tomlin says there's some. It also appears to have been held out for some disciplinary reasons as well, or at least a failure to communicate with the Pittsburgh Steelers, as headline here for Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com, new venture here with us, the Pittsburgh Sports Now family, Pittsburgh Sports Live, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, and now Steelers Now. Launching during all the Steelers drama as the season closes. All our past content, too, all the Steelers videos I've ever done, any Steelers content related to that whole family is on that website for your archive viewing and reading pleasure. But Steelers Brown, right there. It's all about the Steelers and Antonio Brown. There's the headline. Tomlin Brown have a failure to communicate. Failure to communicate. Proud of myself kind of for that headline, by the way. Thought of that off the cuff, just out of nowhere. Similar to a movie out there, but Tomlin Brown have a failure to communicate. And again, Antonio Brown is one of the greatest receivers this game has ever seen. For my money, the best receiver in the game today. There's always a debate with him and Julio Jones, but Antonio Brown, for me, is the best in the world, is the greatest receiver in today's game. And without Week 17, for whatever reason he did not play in that game, his numbers are still proving that across the board. 1,297 yards, 15 touchdowns, an average of 12.5 per catch, 104 receptions in 15 games. So Antonio Brown, with even one game to spare, proved it yet again. He's one of the best receivers this game has ever seen and is the best receiver in today's National Football League. I mean, last year was even a better year, 1,500-plus yards, 1,200 the year before, 1,800 prior to that in 2015, 1,600-plus in 2014. 2013 brings you 1,400-plus, and if you don't believe me, footballreference.com, there it is, all the numbers. 2010 joined the Steelers, didn't get much in-game action. 2011 was still kind of an under-the-radar, lower-tier receiver for the Steelers. That's during their Super Bowl years there. Super Bowl loss, the Green Bay Packers that first year, then really becoming a Pro Bowl receiver. As you see, it goes to 1,100 yards right away once he finally got the full crack at things. 2010, still a backup on the Steelers team that won the AFC. 2012, they didn't play every game there. There was some kind of injury-plagued situations there that year, missing 3 games, almost 1,000. No, but every other year besides that year where he only played 13, 15 more games. As long as he plays actually 14 or more games, is 1,000-plus yards and 1,200-plus receiving yards. It's clear he's one of the best receivers in football and the most consistent. But as I open the show with, and I'm going to stick to this, I don't care who's with me in media. I don't care what the fans say. I don't care where the national media is going. Some are with me on this, some are not. I don't care. Enough is enough. I was at the press conference to end the season Wasn't on New Year's Day, but it was the day after. So Mike Tomlin allowed us to have a New Year's Day break. Didn't give us Christmas Day off, but I digress. So the Wednesday after the Week 17 game, Antonio Brown didn't play the Week 17 game. Should have with a mink coat, and rumors he left that game at halftime. But Mike Tomlin was a little different than normal. Steelers won Week 17, but they didn't get to the playoffs, obviously. The Baltimore Ravens also won. They held on at the end. Baker Mayfield and the Browns couldn't get it done for the Steelers, despite that bizarre image of many of the Steelers, including Juju, kneeling on the field and rooting on the Cleveland Browns, even that whole stadium rooting on the Cleveland Browns. So Baker Mayfield and his all-rookie type of season leading the future of the Browns, but couldn't get it done on that one day. The Steelers didn't deserve it anyway. I did countless shows on this. Go back in the archives and look. The Steelers can blame no one but themselves. They can't blame anyone but themselves, and that includes the referees. That's a show from a couple weeks ago. They tied the Browns before Baker. They lost the Raiders, lost the Broncos, gave up a 16-point lead to the Chargers. Steelers team didn't deserve to make the playoffs. But they don't get in. And Tomlin recaps the win, but also not making the playoffs and all the Antonio Brown drama. But it was a different vibe than normal. It was a packed house, for sure. It was a packed house. But this tweet here from Colin Dunlap, 937 The Fan, the morning show host, colleague of mine, it really says it perfectly to me. And some of you may or may not agree with a lot of Dunlap's tweets, but this one here speaks to me, so I had to bring it forth for the program. Something in his voice and in his look was just different today. He spoke slower, much slower. Mike Tomlin was downright mad. That said, I honestly think he wants to trade Antonio Brown. I think he's finished dealing with him. And I agree. Now, I didn't see Dunlap there. I was there, though. I was at that press conference, and myself and almost the rest of all of Pittsburgh media, to be honest with you, there were some people who don't even cover sports. There were some national pundits. There were some local pundits. There were some guys that are purely running blogs that I haven't seen for 2 years. There were some media members that are very veteran in this business that usually put more of their effort into the Pirates or the Penguins. Again, I haven't seen them in 2 years of that Steelers facility. They were there for this press conference. Some of these people didn't come for the Le'Veon Bell. Where is he? The official end of Le'Veon Bell and the drama and saga of the season in Week 10. Some of you didn't. The same people didn't show up to the national anthem press conferences last year with Alejandro Villanueva standing in front of the team and that whole drama. CNN was there, but I didn't see these media members. However, for this week, to wrap up a roller coaster ride that was the Steelers season where they missed the playoffs and all the drama that now is Antonio Brown and his relationship with the team and his head coach. They were there for this. It was a packed house. There was no seat to be found. I still managed to get a front row seat, but it was standing room only, and there were some standing, to be honest with you. That's how popular this press conference was. But as Dunlap's tweet said, and I'll throw it up there again, there it is. There was something in his voice and in his look that was just different today. He spoke slower, much slower. Mike Tomlin was downright mad, and there's the rest for you. Again, I got that. I've been at 2 years' worth of Mike Tomlin press conferences, and there's some who've been at way more, and that's really enough, to honestly, to gauge Mike Tomlin. Usually deflects, doesn't usually like to throw any of his players under the bus. That included Le'Veon Bell most of this year, would deflect, didn't want to throw him under the bus, would say, I'm only going to talk about players that are here, didn't even want to mention about the offensive line, criticizing Le'Veon Bell. Deflect. Anything with the quarterback, anything with Big Ben, he's deflected. Anything with Todd Haley last year, deflected. Even when Todd Haley was pushed out of Tequila Cowboy on the ground and a fan attacked him, Mike Tomlin didn't really want to go there. He likes to toe the company line. And this is no flack on him. A lot of head coaches do this, and you got to kind of do this when the Rooneys are your employer. That's what they want. So it's a directive from above. But he toes the company line, deflects, and doesn't like to throw anybody under the bus. It's very professional press conferences. Now, he won't always tell us like it is. Sometimes I feel like he's being honest. Sometimes he's deflecting, and I feel like he's not being honest. But it's never appearing to me to be anything really other than positive, or not even positive, but not negative about anybody who's a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. That even goes to Martavis Bryant last year. Didn't want to say the Steelers were going to trade him. Didn't want to say the Steelers wanted to trade him. Didn't want to say that anything really about the Martavis Bryant drama, and that eventually led to Bryant's trade. And this is obviously a much more magnified level, a much greater height. This is one of the best receivers in football. Bryant was a young gun who had some talent, had a couple of good years, but has been nothing since leaving Pittsburgh and was much more expendable. But Mike Tomlin was different in his voice. He was downright mad at this press conference. I got that too, and I was there. Mike Tomlin told us he didn't want to speculate about any trade possibility with Antonio Brown. That's kind of similar, but he also said that there was, and I'll bring up the headline again, Tomlin and Brown have a failure to communicate. That was my headline on SteelersNow.com. Follow us also at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter. And Mike Tomlin told you that as well. That's how I was able to get the headline. Mike Tomlin made it clear. Antonio Brown did not communicate well enough. Antonio Brown ghosted him and the Pittsburgh Steelers. He needed more communication from Antonio Brown. The injury may have been valid. He's not necessarily saying it wasn't. That's not where Tomlin was going. You can have your own opinions on that knee injury. You can get banged up throughout a season. And I know Antonio Brown had a great game against New Orleans the week earlier, but still, he's not calling him out for the injury there. He believed him to be hurt, but he didn't communicate. And then he didn't go have the MRI. Mike Tomlin made that clear. Mike Tomlin told us. He told the most credentialed and veteran media member of all of us, and Ed Bouchette with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, to his face, because Ed kept prodding him, as somebody had to do, that he sent an order for an MRI. Antonio Brown went to him, said he was complaining about the injury. They did the test, and he wanted an MRI. He wanted to fully check it out after the doctors kind of discussed and where they were going to go with things. Antonio Brown didn't go get that MRI. So a player that wanted to play in that final must-win game just blew off the MRI. Didn't tell the Steelers why, blew them off, ghosted the team, didn't communicate. And he made it clear to all of us, a lack of communication led to Antonio Brown not playing in that game. That if Antonio Brown was able to communicate, and if he passed the MRI, and if he appeared healthy, because he's a veteran player who knows the system, who plays very, very well when on the field, he would have gave him deference, and he would have gave him a chance to play in that game. But due to a lack of communication, Tomlin and Brown have a failure to communicate. Due to a lack of communication, Antonio Brown did not play in Week 17. And that's more than he usually gives. He made it clear. Antonio Brown did not communicate well enough. And the way he made that clear, it sounded like, oh, here we go again, rolling his eyes kind of, softer tone, little agitated. He was also more forthright than normal. He held a press conference almost to exclusively talk about Antonio Brown and his drama on the heels of a season in which they missed the playoffs when they thought coming into the year they could be a Super Bowl champion. And maybe should have been with that kind of talent. And the reason why they didn't make the playoffs were a lot of games against bad teams going the wrong way. And if they would have taken care of that business, they would have been in the playoffs. The Browns kick a field goal. Steelers would have been in the playoffs, despite all their shortcomings this year, all their failures, and other things that maybe they couldn't control, that they let get to that point. So he certainly didn't want to talk about Antonio Brown for over a half hour with us. Rarely gives us more than 15 minutes at a press conference at noon on Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day it ends up being. And this was a day after. He wanted to collect himself. He wanted to have the day off. Tony Brown didn't show up on Tuesday. Tomlin didn't either. Said nobody had to be there on Tuesday on New Year's Day. It was a holiday, but it's also after Week 17 in the season closing. Has it Wednesday, and then so even more time to collect himself. And Wednesday, it appeared that he was different. He was upset. And honestly, I don't blame him. Now, again, I understand Antonio Brown is one of the greatest receivers in the game today, if not in football history. You're not going to probably replace that production. But Juju Smith-Schuster has now become a legit all-pro. He's actually become a legit number one receiver. He's number two on this team because of Antonio Brown, and you're always going to be number two behind Antonio Brown in his prime, which he's still in his prime. And great went on the field this year. But Juju Smith-Schuster is a number one. He could be a number one on most other teams, and he could be a number one with Antonio Brown on this team. Juju Smith-Schuster has emerged after a 900-plus yard receiving season his rookie year out of USC. He was a great player in college, but nobody predicted that. He really became the number two. That's why Martavis Bryant was so expendable. He became very, very reliable last year as that season progressed and became one of the better players on that team. And then you pivot into this season where Juju Smith-Schuster becomes one of the better players in the National Football League. He becomes a guy right there with Antonio Brown with a 1,000-plus yard receiving season. 917 yards receiving last year as a rookie in 14 games, mind you. So if he would have played 16 games, that would have been over 1,000 there. First rookie ever with 900-plus yard receiving. It's a Randy Moss type of year, right, entering the National Football League. And this year, in fact, better yards per catch, 12.8 to Brown's 12.5. 7 touchdowns to Brown's 15. Played the full 16. Brown only 15 games missing week 17. 111 catches, so more than AB there. And then 1,426 yards receiving for Juju. So Juju actually led the team in total yards receiving right up there in the National Football League and has fully become a number one receiver on this team. And I get it. Again, I know. Here's Antonio Brown stats. I get it. He's right there too. 1,297 yards, one game less played, 12.5, right around the same as 12.8. Targeted around the same, in fact, more. 104 catches, 7 less than Juju. But that's almost splitting hairs. They both had great years this year. But Juju now has become a legit threat, a legit number one. And they both help each other. I get it, too. Antonio Brown garners a double coverage from his career success. It allowed open space for Juju at times. They're also a little different receivers. Juju going through the middle a little more often than AB. He wants the flashy touchdown and able to spread the field and stretch the field a little bit more than Juju. It got AB in the end zone more than double the amount of times as Juju this season. But Juju's also in his second year, okay? Juju can only get better from where he is. And I also get that he had that horrible fumble which cost them the game against New Orleans. But he ended up being voted team MVP. And we can have a debate on whether that should have went to Big Ben, despite all his interceptions. All the yards and TDs are there, but all the interceptions are also there, so critical mistakes from him as well. Or maybe even TJ Watt on defense or someone on the offensive line. You can go in any different direction. But it's a team that didn't make the playoffs, so really what does the team MVP for a failure really matter? This team didn't make the playoffs. Do you really want to be team MVP for a team that misses the postseason? Does that matter? No. Juju was team MVP, though, so his teammates respect him. And I get all his off-the-field antics can sometimes be annoying. They annoy me as well, trust me. I don't want him jumping in front of my car, stopping traffic in the middle of rush hour here in Pittsburgh to post something on social media and gain some likes on Twitter. No, that bothers me. That's damn annoying. But on the field, he's one of the best in the game. It's his second year. I can't take nothing away from him there. 1,400-plus receiving yards, 7 TDs, 111 catches. He's his second year, sophomore year in the NFL. And 900-plus yards last year, missing 2 games. So a reason why you can get away with trading ATAB is because Juju's become one of the best receivers in football and can easily be your number one. And James Washington could then be your number 2. I get he's also had his issues this year, but the Steelers have spliced in different receivers over the years, especially with Ben. Going back to Plesko Burris, freak-out session when he was gone. I know he won a Super Bowl MVP with the Giants, but he shot himself in the leg, and that was it. So Antonio Holmes, Super Bowl MVP with the Steelers. End up trading him due to marijuana and different issues with him. No big deal. Moving on. Mike Wallace, Martavis Bryant. A lot of talent has been around here, but they move on when things get rough and when guys really act a fool too much. Now Juju and AB. Even Le'Veon Bell as a running back who also had time as a receiver. This offense is still going to score points with or without AB. It'll be more difficult, sure, and I know they struggled in Week 17 without him, but the offense struggles won't just be because of AB not being there if it does struggle. Ben needs to take more care of the football. Different things need to go on for this team to be better next year, for sure, and defensively too. The kicking game, number one. But Juju can be the number one. And with James Washington getting more looks, I think he can get decent production as number two, honestly, and Ben feels the same way. So, on the field, Antonio Brown is not impossible to replace. We've also seen this throughout history, guys. History is just repeating itself now. Because it's not just me saying a lot of this. Let's go down through more colleague tweets. Here's Aditi. NFL Network had her on my show in the past with the Trib. Excellent reporter there nationally at the NFL Network. If we're reading the tea leaves, Antonio Brown is likely gone. Mike Tomlin said certainly when asked if there's a point where talent becomes not worth it. Multiple teammates say they're done. He's not looking chastised in his videos, and as Mike Garofolo tells us, there's no cap issue. I'll get to the cap issue in a second, but yeah, there's not the big cap issue many of you think there is. I get the $20 million, I get the $60 left in his contract, but they can work around that. Point of it is, when you are more trouble than you're worth, regardless of the money, regardless if there was a cap issue, there's enough talent already on this team that signed for at least next year and already worked into the books. Sometimes you're more trouble than you're worth. Mike Tomlin hinted at it. Aditi picked up on it. Many others have said the same thing, and even teammates kind of went there too to end the year. Antonio Brown is just simply more trouble than he's worth. Look through the history of the league. It's this position, many Hall of Famers, many great impact players at the receiver position, and I get sometimes they're divas because they rely on a quarterback, they rely on others to get them the football in order for them to have success. I get the frustration there. But look at throughout history. Randy Moss, eventually having to leave Minnesota, greatest player in Minnesota Viking history, him and Fran Tarkenton, and I'll go Moss. I mean, Moss was an absolute stud coming out of college. The Dallas Cowboys didn't draft him despite promising drafting him due to all his troubles in college. He was all over the place. Could have went to Florida State, bumped out of there, looked at Notre Dame, bumped out of that opportunity, had to go to Marshall, was a Heisman candidate there, but different problems with him off the field, and that's a whole other drama that ESPN did a film about, but entered the NFL with that kind of drama and that baggage. And his antics carried over into great, tremendous seasons. Already building that greatest of all time type resume, like Brown here, with Minnesota in that first tenure. Shipped him out of town. And not many teams really wanted him. The Oakland Raiders eventually picking him up. Didn't like it there. They weren't winning, and he complained, moaned, and got himself shipped out of there. And then New England had the greatest receiving season ever with him and Tom Brady. That's the greatest Patriot team I've ever seen, even though they didn't win a championship. But him and Tom Brady light it up. Brady finally gets his all-pro wide receiver, really stretches the field more than even the Patriots have been able to do since Moss leaving. But he wasn't Teflon there. After the Super Bowl appearance and all the records, he eventually started to have his antics build up there and talked about his contract and started to rock the boat and made subtle jabs. And Belichick's not putting up with that anymore. Shipped him out of town. And then little by little, eventually out of the National Football League, even shipped out of Minnesota on a second tenure, very short-lived there. Catches Favre's 500th touchdown pass for a trivia question. Randy Moss, the answer there, 500th touchdown reception. It was Randy Moss. 500 touchdown pass from Favre goes to Moss. A very brief period of time together, but Moss caught that ball. And then out of there because he's criticizing a caterer with the Vikings. Terrell Owens. Again, I'm glad he got in the Hall of Fame. He deserved the Hall of Fame. He should have been on the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. I'll say that and argue with anybody. Terrell Owens should have been a Hall of Famer on the first ballot. Search my name, search Twitter. I've been pumping those irons, and even on my personal podcast. And Terrell Owens actually even listened and gave me some dap there, promoting it himself because he wasn't getting many media members to defend him. But I've defended him to no end in terms of he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. Should have been there on the first ballot. One of the greatest receivers of all time, bar none. Surefire Hall of Famer it should have been. Eventually did get there. But, and a big but, he also was arguably a team obliterator for his nickname. He was kind of a locker room cancer. Great success taking over for Jerry Rice in San Francisco, but then eventually shipped out of town there. They couldn't put up with him anymore. It was just he was more trouble than he's worth to the San Francisco 49ers. Rescued by the Eagles, helps them get over the hump. They finally go from losing NFC Championship games to getting into the Super Bowl. Already grumblings there, though, prior to even that game, with him having some injuries, and then he plays through the injury, had to sign a waiver to risk his life to play in that Super Bowl against New England during their first dynastic run. Great game for him. I mean, he, I believe, 9 catches, 122 yards, would have been Super Bowl MVP had they won that game. They don't, but then throws his teammate under the bus, throws McNabb under the bus, rocks the boat yet again, deactivated the next season. That's it. Despite all the success, that tenure short-lived. Goes to Dallas, success there, numbers there. They don't win a championship, though. And then eventually they have to part ways. Jerry Jones couldn't put up with it, and he's put up with a lot through the years with that franchise, owning that franchise and the cast of characters that have been there. He's never cared about who's been in Big D, if they can help win games. T.O. helped them win games, but eventually they got fed up. Buffalo, Cincinnati, same thing. Chad Ochocinco, former teammate of T.O. I watched the Football Life on him the other day, and it was very entertaining, but certainly a head case at times. The Bengals eventually even were fed up with him, wearing the Hall of Fame jacket, all the celebrations. Found it funny. It was entertaining. Not going to criticize there, but then eventually ended his career with a domestic violence issue and being ushered out of town and released by the Dolphins, his hometown team, and training camp. And I can go on in terms of wide receivers in the last 20 years that have been great players, that they eventually became more trouble than they're worth. And sure, not every wide receiver. There's the Art Monks and Rod Smiths of the world that are great wide receivers that just kind of shut up and respect their teammates, carry the football, go in the end zone, catch the ball, and throw it back to the referee, a Walter Payton type of thing. But it's rare at that position because you need an ego to have success, and you need to get the ball thrown to you. You can't control when it comes there. You need to garner that respect a lot of the time with your bravado, and it builds this kind of cancer sometimes. But Antonio Brown is no different than Terrell Owens, Randy Moss, Chad Ochocinco. Great player, can help your team win there. You love the numbers. You love the success that you have with him. An impact player, a great player. Great of his era as a wide receiver. But also an egomaniac, also selfish, also a diva, also dramatic, also cares about himself more than the team at times, also wants to fuel the drama, loves being the center of attention, even though he complains about the media being obsessed with him when he's just giving us something to work with. And eventually, which is now the case for Antonio Brown, more trouble than he's worth. More trouble than he's worth. Antonio Brown is now more trouble than he's worth to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And lastly, as I go around the docket here, I kind of alluded to this, but here's the cap space. Mike Garafolo, NFL Network, Aditi alluded to him saying that really the cap space isn't this a humongous issue that everybody wants to point to. Well, the Steelers got to keep Antonio Brown regardless of his antics, because you can't just eventually. Yeah, Tomlin's been criticized for this in the past. He's let the inmates run the asylum. He's won games there. He's won a championship. He's been to 2. They've even won a lot of division titles and 13 games last year, and they've been to the playoffs a bunch. And he's had a Bill Cowher-like resume. I did a show defending Mike Tomlin there in terms of his Steelers legacy. Everybody loves Cowher so much, but Cowher didn't in any way have a bulletproof resume, and Mike Tomlin's has already been just as great of a tenure as Bill Cowher. But he's been criticized for running too loose of a ship. That included Le'Veon Bell, helped to get to that point with him, point of no return, and that included Antonio Brown. So regardless here of any of these cap space comments, $14 million cap space 2020 and 2021 would accelerate into 2019. $15 million cash and cap would come off. So no, nothing cap-wise would stop the Steelers from dealing Brown. Everyone wants to bring up the rest of the contract. Everyone wants to bring up the cap space. There it is. It wouldn't be as big of a problem as you think. the cap would not stop the Steelers from trading Antonio Brown. And they would get many suitors for him. He's a great player. There are teams that would be interested. There are teams that would give him the high draft pick. There are teams that would give them much better than what you got for Santonio Holmes back in the day, a former Super Bowl MVP. You would get much more for Antonio Brown. There's no suspension looming. There's no problem with the NFL drug policy. Not to say he might not be abusing there, but I mean, there's nothing officially that the NFL can come down on him for. It's just about him being a Terrell Owens type or a Randy Moss type. It doesn't necessarily get you suspended on the field for anything in terms of cheating or anything like that. I mean, Terrell Owens never had any legal problems. His only suspension was when the Eagles suspended him and ended his season because they were just sick of him. That's it. Antonio Brown's like that. No other real issues. But his drama, his antics, the Facebook Live after the playoff game against the Patriots when that is against policy and nobody else should be doing that and no one should put up with it. Tomlin let that go and Antonio Brown didn't care and it ran amok and he did Facebook Lives again. It became a whole thing with him on Facebook Live. The earlier this season drama and the reports that from previous spring of throwing furniture off a balcony that almost killed a little child down in Florida at his luxury apartment with one of his many mistresses there, and that whole scandal that really kind of went away, but it could have been much, much worse for Antonio Brown. He could have killed somebody, literally. And you all know the rest. I mean, it's been a year, it's been a long journey with Antonio Brown and the Steelers and all the drama that surrounded him. And 99.9% of it is self-inflicted. Okay? I know some out there think the Pittsburgh media is just as obsessed with Antonio Brown, and we make things up with him, and we're causing these problems. Maybe some things you can think were fueling the fire, not with AB. AB is doing a Facebook Live with James Harrison, who's a former Steeler that is well into the issue and drama of the Steelers because he hates the Steeler franchise still. This is James Harrison, who's very bitter at the Steeler franchise for how their divorce went down. He's appearing on all these national shows to rub it in their face. He loves this. He's soaking up the Le'Veon Bell drama, the Steelers missing the playoffs, the Mike Tomlin questions, and now the Antonio Brown drama. Loves every bit of it. And he's the one really winning from this AB drama. He's getting the scoop. It's helping his post-playing career as he's an analyst or whatever you want to call him on all these national shows. But he hadn't communicated with his head coach since the game on Sunday that he missed. Left at halftime. Didn't speak to his teammates. Didn't speak to the team. Wasn't a part of the meeting at the end of the year. Not doing any of the soul searching that the Steelers were directed to do. Not at the facility at all this week. And maybe he would have been if they were playing this week. But again, it's just hindsight and we're never going to know that answer. It was clear Tomlin tried to communicate with him. It was clear he didn't love hearing from his agent prior to the game that he's ready to go when he hadn't communicated with Tomlin prior to that at all and ghosted the team. That's not protocol. AB didn't care. He thought he could do whatever he wanted. And Tomlin was fed up with it and hadn't heard from Brown. No communication for several days now. We're in Wednesday as I'm recording this. That was Sunday. Wednesday, the press conference. Here's the show. Sunday, the game. Hadn't heard from each other. No communication at all. Tomlin Brown have a failure to communicate. There it is, SteelersNow.com. Tomlin Brown have a failure to communicate. Couldn't be any more literal than that. Couldn't be any more literal than that, really. How are you not going to communicate with your head coach? And during all the drama, you hear everything. You're all over social media. You know what the questions are. You go and meet your former teammate who had a horrible divorce with the Steelers. You know still is invested in hating the Steelers, is rubbing it in their face, is appearing on shows criticizing the team all season and loving every second of it. And don't think that's not the case with James Harrison, by the way, guys. He's loving this. You go hang out with him and watch Mike Tomlin's press conference. The two of them mentioned they're watching. You could hear it in the background of their Facebook Live. And you do an interview with James Harrison, but you don't communicate with your head coach. You don't communicate with the legendary owner. You don't communicate with anyone else at all. PR staff, communications department, secretary, security, nobody. They're trying to reach you. You ghost them. You don't communicate with anybody with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and no one sees a problem with that? No one sees that as insubordinate. It's that to a T. Antonio Brown is a great player. No denying. They will feel some kind of impact not having him. It'll be harder on Juju. It'll be harder on Ben. It'll be harder on the offense. But with Antonio Brown, they have not won a Super Bowl, despite all the success and all the yards and touchdowns and numbers I've read you. You can find them on your own if you didn't watch earlier. They didn't win a Super Bowl with him. Terrell Owens, a great player, appeared in one Super Bowl and would have been Super Bowl MVP, but they didn't win despite his heroics. And then eventually got sick of his problems. And he was more trouble than he's worth. He was too drama for many teams in the NFL. Randy Moss. He appeared in a Super Bowl with the New England Patriots. It's the best Patriot team during that Belichick-Brady run, bar none. Undefeated in the regular season, losing in upset fashion, one of the greatest upsets in sports history, to the New York Giants in the Super Bowl. He played well in that game, could have had the game-winning touchdown catch. One of the best single seasons ever for a wide receiver that year in 2007. Look at the numbers. They didn't care. They didn't win a Super Bowl with him. He appeared in one later with the Niners, and he was basically a bench player getting some mop-up duty. He had some great sound bites that year, but that team didn't win either. So he appeared in two, didn't win any. T.O. appeared in one, didn't win any. Chad Ochocinco appeared in one with the Patriots a few years after Moss. When Moss left, they kind of replaced Moss with Ochocinco. But he had a horrible year. I think it was 12 catches, maybe 20 catches for 200 and some yards. Horrendous year. Worst year of his career individually. Couldn't fit into that offense. Didn't really rock the boat that year. Did get to play in the Super Bowl and get a reception. But that hardly counts as him really even appearing and leading a team to the game. And they also didn't win. Just add that. Antonio Brown's no different. He appeared in one as a young rookie who really wasn't involved that much in the offense. They've been in AFC Championship games with him as the best player on the team. He's led them there. He's been a great player even in those games, in AFC title games a couple years ago against the Patriots for one, with the Facebook Live happening right before that and the drama that was that Facebook Live. But didn't win a championship with him. Didn't win a Super Bowl with Antonio Brown. Last year, 13 wins, had a great year, losing the second round despite all the points. The defense let him down, but Antonio Brown was there producing, and it didn't mean a championship automatically. This year, another great year from AB, even without Week 17, and didn't even get in the playoffs. It's not even a playoff year, meaning he's not a quarterback. That was the reason why quarterbacks win the MVPs 99.9% of the time in football history and even Super Bowl history, because they are the most important part of the team. He's not a member of the offensive line. It's a critical part of the team, really, really important. Not a member of the defense. That's big. Defense wins championships is the old adage. Not a member of the defense. Not even a running back, even though maybe you can argue about the importance between those two positions. He's a wide receiver. It's one of those positions that can mightily be replaced in the NFL. Over time, the Eagles were still winning after T.O. The Patriots still won after Moss. The Bengals eventually were able to win again without Ochocinco because they got another premier wide receiver in A.J. Green. You can replace the position. You need the numbers. You need someone to help your quarterback. Sure, you don't want to put him on an island like sometimes the Packers do with Aaron Rodgers. But you don't have to have the greatest receiver in football for your team to win. Julio Jones, he's in the argument with Antonio Brown as the greatest receiver in football. They're not a playoff team this year either. Matt Ryan, former MVP. Julio Jones, one of the greatest receivers in football. Not a playoff team. No guarantee there. They've been to one Super Bowl but didn't win. No guarantee in winning a championship with great all-pro wide receivers. None at all. It's not an irreplaceable position. You can draft to replace the position. You might already have James Washington as a young gun on this team to replace your second guy and then have Juju step into the one. They have the fortunate cushion to have Juju already a one on this roster, able to step right in. That wasn't the case 2 years ago when these antics were going on against the Patriots in the playoffs and the Facebook Lives. Juju wasn't there then. They didn't have anybody really, besides maybe Martavis Bryant, to slide in if AB was gone and they were fed up with the drama. Now they do. They can replace AB as a number one with Juju. He can do it. He can. And I believe in James Washington can do the number two at least adequately. Where they can draft somebody, they can slide somebody else in, they can get somebody for cheap. Baltimore Ravens are a playoff team, and they don't have any premier wide receiver. They won the AFC North. No elite wide receivers on that team. They were able for years to kind of stay the course. Now, it certainly wasn't another championship season. They were worse when there weren't as many weapons around Joe Flacco, but teams have been able to win. Teams have been able to get in the playoffs without having to have a Julio Jones or Antonio Brown or an elite wide receiver on their roster. T.O., eventually, Terrell Owens, T.O. is the perfect example, really. He summarizes this. A.B. is almost a T.O. reincarnate. But really, it's just clear. Antonio Brown is 100% more trouble than he's worth now to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they absolutely must trade him. Terrell Owens, a Hall of Famer, should have been first ballot. Eventually, more trouble than he's worth. Randy Moss, a surefire legend of the game, a revolutionary, and was a first ballot. Great player. Eventually, more trouble than he's worth. Chad Ochocinco, a decent player, a great player for several years. Look at the numbers. Not a Hall of Famer, but a great player. Eventually, more trouble than he's worth. Antonio Brown, a great player, probably a future Hall of Famer and one of the greatest receivers of all time. Greatest receiver in the game today. And now, he's more trouble than he's worth. The Pittsburgh Steelers need to be fed up and trade Antonio Brown. And what you need to do, whether or not the Steelers trade Antonio Brown or not, and either way it'll be fun for us, is visit our new venture in the family, SteelersNow.com. Go to SteelersNow.com for more articles like this, more headlines like this. Tomlin Brown have a failure to communicate. That gem is on the site, penned by myself, as well as all of Mike Tomlin's hot takes from his press conference to end the season. So the end of the season Mike Tomlin press conference, it's there on SteelersNow.com. Articles about what change is necessary outside of Antonio Brown and potentially trading him due to being sick of the drama. What needs to be changed on defense. If James Conner can be the guy for next season. He did get hurt towards the end of this year, even though it was an all-pro year. There's going to be even more Le'Veon Bell drama since he has another franchise opportunity and all the craziness that could be coming of that offseason. Big Ben even needing to be better. Great yards, great touchdowns. Single season records on those for himself. But a lot of mistakes, a lot of interceptions. Led the league in interceptions. Unacceptable. Needs to be better there. Even coaching staff, Keith Butler, probably the guy to be the scapegoat this year. Haley was last year. All that on SteelersNow.com. Also go to PittsburghSportsNow.com for Pitt, other colleges, and high school athletics here in the area and region. PittsburghSoccerNow.com. They still have a website. No more shows, but still have a website. PittsburghHockeyNow.com. Kongursky's venture covering the Pittsburgh Penguins, who now are the team and the team to watch. They are really playing well now, kind of turning the corner there. They have the most talent in the league still. They're going to be a contender, and they're going to find themselves in the playoffs, unlike the Steelers were able to do. That's going to happen. And Penn's Jesus. Penguins Jesus looming over and watching over them, so they have that the Steelers don't. But PittsburghHockeyNow.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live on Twitter. Click subscribe for us on YouTube. Click subscribe on the YouTube channel. Make it easier for us to get this content to you, especially now in the Steelers off season. And also follow us, at least the Steelers venture, on Twitter at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter. So, again, find us. We're out there. Follow me at Mike Asti 11 for more of my viral activity, whether or not you like it or not. So that Twitter account comes with a warning. Follow at your own risk. But I'm just going to tell it like it is. I'm going to be honest. And that's what I did here. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm done. They're probably done. Some teammates are done. Media's done. It looks like a lot of fans are done. There's value there. He's a great player. Some other team will want him. But Steelers got to be done. Got to be done eventually now with Antonio Brown. Steelers didn't do this at all this year. It was a roller coaster ride of a lack of conquering. Well, this has been another gold quality edition of Mike Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live from the Beaver County Auto Studios. Brought to you also by SteelersNow.com, our new site in the family, conquering sports radio one day at a time.